Hey friends, thanks for taking time to listen in on a conversation Dick and I had about the Las Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. We concluded our monthly race reviews for the 2024 season looking at these final races, even if we weren't super excited about them. That said, we shared our highlights and also got into some of the on and off track drama. But before we get to our conversation, I need to ask, can you help us out? If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with your other F1 fans. We know our growth is because of you, and the guys and I thank you. Hope you enjoy our conversation. All right, Dick, I am in some ways super excited to have this conversation about the end of the year, the November, December 2024 races. And then the other part of me, to be totally candid, is kind of checked out because the season's over and I'm ready for 2025. But I'm also a rule person and I like to check off the box. You know this, like if I have a to-do list.
Right.
And I couldn't say, hey, let's just cancel this conversation because we had 3 races that we should talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. You know, it's funny. Once it became inevitable that Max was going to win the world championship, I was kind of like, all right, yeah, I'll give it a watch, but whatever. And that's not to say that some of the races didn't have good moments, but I'm kind of like you. It's sort of like, yeah, bring on 2025.
Like, I think the thing that I did appreciate is that after Max won, we still had to see who was going to win constructors. And that took all the way till the last race. So I was glad about that. But otherwise, I probably would have felt like, all right, we need these 2 weeks. I'm tired. I feel sorry for the circus that they have to keep going around and doing what they do. And so, like, I think that even goes to a larger question as to whether or not we really need 24 races. But that's not something that anybody's asking us. We can still give our opinion. But we have 3 races to talk about. And we need to finish this list and say we got through all of the 24 season. Let's start with Las Vegas. And what was your highlight from that race?
I think it was maybe a couple things, and I thought it was interesting. One is, and I noted this, in my race notes to you is that it's fascinating to me that when the temperatures are low, Mercedes is flying. It's like if it's a warm weather race, forget it. They're going to struggle. But you put them in cool weather, and for some reason, that car just comes alive. And cool air means more air density. It means maybe a little easier on the tires. I mean, I just don't know. But I mean, I thought that was something that was really fascinating. The other thing that Franco Colapinto, this is weird, but what really stuck out to me is the fact that this kid is clearly blindingly quick, but man, he's crashed a lot lately. And the crash that he had at Vegas was another massive crash. Really depleted a bunch of spare parts. And I think that his value in the F1 paddock has gone down because of all the crashing he's done. I don't think there's any doubt this kid's quick and he deserves a place in F1. But you notice that nobody went out and spent the money to free his contract up from Williams because they thought, that's a lot of money to free him up from Williams, and then we're going to clearly have a bunch of crash damage to pay for. So I think we'll pass. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you on that point because ahead of the Las Vegas Grand Prix, people are talking about him possibly usurping Jack Doohan from Alpine, maybe being a seat in Red Bull, but then slowly after Las Vegas, it just seemed to simmer down. I think that even before that, right, it was a little shocking that people were thinking that, in my opinion, at least, because yes, he was doing great, but we also had a number of other drivers who were free. And it seemed like, wow, would a team like Alpine want to have to go through whatever contract negotiations they would have had with Jack Doohan? It would really have to prove to them that whoever they were going to substitute in was such a credible upgrade in that they would go through all those hoops. Yeah, I wonder if that Las Vegas, like you said, lowered their expectations and certainty when if they knew they were going to have to go through a lot. Doesn't mean that Franco's not capable of being an F1, but I
Clearly.
wonder if you thought it wasn't only Franco, but also the challenge of what Williams is going through right now. Like, I
Sure.
constantly wonder about that. Like, I know well, many people are concerned of what this is going to do for Carlos's transition over there for his career. But, and we both have been very supportive and of Williams and what they're trying to do. But do you think that they're so far behind right now that a Franco coming in, it wouldn't be very helpful? Like, there was only so much he could do. Do you see what I'm kind
Right.
of circling around?
Right. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, them getting signs for next year was an absolute coup because that guy, if you look at what he's done, his resume going from no to McLaren to Ferrari, he's actually gone and helped raise the game of those teams. And you're not going to get that from Franco. Not that Franco doesn't have speed and pace and all that, but he's too new, obviously. And he's going to be expensive, at least at the start. And so, people are saying, yeah, but he can bring in money from Argentina. Well, Argentina, really? I mean, they've got massive economic problems down there. I don't see him bringing tens of millions of dollars to a team. I could be wrong, but so I think Franco going and doing another season of F2 would be a really good thing for that young man, and kind of because the late great Carol Smith once said the really really great drivers start off fast and hairy and they crash a lot, and you just have to give them time to figure out how to just dial it back a little bit. He says the great ones do not start out slow and smooth and eventually get fast. So, that's the battle that you're dealing with here with Franco. Are you willing to pay for the crash damage in the meantime? Do you have the patience? And will he learn?
Right, right. And Williams clearly, even if they have a desire, they don't have the financial
Right.
bank to do that. Like in
Yep.
many ways, they did that with Logan,
Yep.
and and then they had their own pre-existing issues. So I could see that as much as they believe in Franco, it just might not be the right timing for him to show up
Right.
that Williams seat.
Yep.
Well, for me, I guess I would say my highlights were the Mercedes 1-2, and then Carlos coming in at P3. That was
Yep.
really exciting to me. I mean, George made it look like it was so easy. I said this in my race notes. He drove a very, very mature drive.
Yep.
And I was also impressed with how Lewis came from P10, which flash forward, we know where he started in Abu Dhabi. So but P10 was pretty big deal, especially in Vegas with it being a street track. I thought he did a great job there. It showed that he had confidence at least that weekend. And then for Carlos to make it, considering all the stuff that happened at Ferrari with their calls that were so confusing. I mean, I did not understand why they weren't ready. At least that's what they said after the fact, right? The pit stop business of calling him in and telling him to stay out, and Charles, and it just, so for Carlos to have made it to P3, I felt like those were the highlights for me of that race. Of course, there were other things that I noted in the race notes, like for example, Kevin's one stop. I was wow, nobody really talked about that. I felt like because all the other drama that was happening at the front of the field. But to me, I think for Mercedes, that was a really good moment, and I hope that as they moved at that point, I remember thinking as they're moving through the rest of the season with 2 remaining races and already moving towards the 2025 car, I hope that this gives them that additional motivation to be able to do this to the best of their abilities, at least for this year.
You have to think to a large degree, most of the teams were already thinking about 2025. I mean, sure, they're thinking, man, we want to win the constructors championship or maybe, whatever. But again, once Max cemented the world championship, that's what the fans look for from a driver's standpoint, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, I wish that Formula 1 would do more to highlight the fact that the money is actually sitting with constructors versus drivers. As much as we cheer for the driver, but if the team doesn't get higher in the standings, the money's not there. And then it also affects their wind tunnel time, which then affects the type of car that team is going to be able to develop for the driver that we're all rooting for. Like like the bicycle, I guess. You need both of those wheels going. And
Yep.
so like I've tried to personally make it a focus of if it's not like this year was one of the aberration years, right? Where it's not the same team and the driver, wait, let me say the team and their driver winning at the same time, which that in of itself should be a higher conversation outside of, okay, do we substitute Sergio? Like it shows like in previous years how well a team has had to work all around to make it. I just feel like this should be a bigger point of conversation. Okay, so let's move to Qatar because I know that both of us had very interesting feelings about this. And I'll start on this because honestly, I think this was the hardest races for me to watch this year.
Yep.
I
Agreed.
struggled to process everything that occurred. And I even feel like my race notes reflect that for anyone who was interested in my take and listening to it. I would say go listen to what I feel like was a very confused Sabrina trying to process this. And so I don't really know how I feel about the race outside of I'm glad it happened. I'm glad it's done. I'm glad we were able to quickly move to Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Now, one thing that I will say though about this whole thing is that Red Bull, a lot's been said about all the people who've left Red Bull, right? Senior leaders, starting with Adrian Newey, but others as well. And yet, if you watch them, they went out, they qualified for the sprint race. Max struggled in the sprint race. And yet, the very next thing that they did after the sprint race, they had to go out and qualify. And, Christian Horner said, well, we threw everything but the kitchen sink at the car. But dadgum, they reacted. They started getting those tires coming to life where Max could drive the car. And guess what? The newfound chassis adjustments obviously brought the tires to life. The car suddenly worked, and Max was instantly competitive. And that says a lot to me about the team and the depth of the talent that they've got. Yes, losing Adrian Newey is a huge blow. And I think it's going to be something that that is going to be felt for several years down the road, not just in 2025 or 26. But having said that, the fact that the at the track team and the guys back in the factory driving the simulator and trying stuff and all that, hugely impressive. I was really, really impressed by what they did. And so hats off to Red Bull.
I think that's a very good point. I like that you highlight that, especially, I can't remember how many years have we been going to Qatar now? Is it the 4th year?
Sounds right.
Yeah. And so considering last year was the year that it was so hot, of course, it was earlier in the year, which is part of the reason why the temperature was as hot as it was. But then for it to go into that cool and the data, they don't have decades worth of data like you do for Spa or Silverstone, decade for like even Coda, right? So the fact that the team, as you said, was very quick, like that agility is something to be noted in a team ability, corporate aspect of it, that they were able to very easily pivot and not just hit slightly near the mark, but they really nailed it. And then you had it in the hands of a capable, highly capable driver like Max. So I like that you brought that up. Let me ask you, what do you think about the way this is going into a little bit more drama than we generally don't go into, but you noted it in your race notes, Esteban Ocon's departure from Alpine at the very end of Qatar. What are your thoughts about that?
I think ever since Monaco, somewhere within the Alpine team, they kind of said, look, we're going to deal with Esteban and his, I'm not sure, he's disruptive. Maybe that's the best way to put it. And we're going to more focus on helping Pierre to be successful and build towards 2025. And, at some stage, it'll be good riddance, Esteban. And I think that it was sort of like, yeah, we've had enough. And when Haas came to him and said, yeah, we want to run Esteban in the postseason test at Abu Dhabi, they said, great, but we're releasing Esteban now. And I mean, it was like they've been waiting for an excuse to get rid of him. And it just so happened it was for the last race this season, which then gave Doohan an opportunity to go out and do an F1 weekend, and at least get familiar with the team and how they operate. So probably a win-win for everybody, but still pretty interesting, I thought.
It just seemed odd, but then I feel like this last year, maybe even 2, when we've watched what's going on at Alpine, you just kinda scratch your head constantly going, "What are they
Mhm.
doing?
Mhm.
Ho Why are you treating people like this, or why are you putting out messaging like this?" It just
Yep.
seems unfortunate because especially with the history of the team and its ability to have, really won and led so many different aspects of the sport, you don't wanna see
Right.
it going in that direction.
When Alonso just up and left Alpine a couple years ago,
Mhm.
everybody was like, "What are you doing?" Right? And, Alonso doesn't exactly have the reputation of joining and leaving teams at the right time, but you know what? You can argue he nailed it there now.
Right.
Certainly, Aston Martin has not been exactly setting the world on fire this year either, but comparatively speaking, I mean, he must have known something. He must have known, "Hey, the leadership here is just atrocious. I'm out," something like that.
I think so, and I feel like for Fernando, the Aston Martin, he must have thought this is worth building, kinda like what we're seeing with Carlos. If I'm going
Yeah.
to go somewhere that it's clear they're not at the top, but if I can come in, I can build it, what a story, and I'm
Right.
willing to put in that work. I wonder if both of them see the blocks on the table, but they know they
Mhm.
have to be a part of putting the building blocks together, and
Right.
they're willing to put in that time.
Yeah,
Okay,
for
so I
sure.
do have a question about the whole mirror debris stuff on the track. The stewarding decision, did that make sense to you? Or not, was it stewarding at that point? The race director makes that decision, right? About whether or not to call in the VSC or the safety car at that point, right? That's not a steward's decision. It's the race director, right?
It's the race director, yeah, but the stewards would have made the call, right? And so,
Mhm.
yeah, just I don't know, man. That was just one of those weird deals. And and this is in motors, any kind of motorsports, not just Formula One. You really don't want the stewards to be the ones making the decision of the outcome of the race.
Mhm.
And just like you don't want the referees, in a football game or a basketball game actually deciding who wins the game. It's
Mhm.
just yeah, it's just not good.
Yeah, I was really perplexed by that. I think I even said that in the race notes itself. But I will say I was pleased that Joe got his points. And if it really was the last time he was going to be in a Formula One car this year, would be it. I was glad that at
Yeah,
least at some point he got points so he could
right.
walk away with head held high. Not that
Yep.
if he hadn't, he shouldn't have, because I think he had a lot of the deck stacked against him and he's opened the door for a lot of racers that are non Europeans to
Mhm.
be able to feel like they can at least attempt this, and the kid will
Right.
sacrifice so much to be there. And then
Yep.
I did say this in my race notes as well. Fernando moving from 8th up to 7th, which maybe in the grand scheme, people are like, okay, that's just one spot. But considering how chaotic that race was, I was really glad that Fernando was able to hold on to it for Aston and the points
Mhm.
that they were going to need.
Yep.
Not that they were going to go way up in the standings, but I really wanted him to be able to keep fighting, and I was really
Right.
impressed by that.
Yeah, just another really smart drive that most people would not notice, but it was definitely a worthy drive. I mean, no question about it.
Let's go to our Abu Dhabi final
Mhm.
race of the year. What was your highlight?
Well, certainly, I think just showing the strength of McLaren.
Mhm.
But I also wondered about, again, Colapinto, had another tough one, and you got to think that to a certain degree, I mean, Alex Albon said it after the season was over with that he felt like 2024 was a missed opportunity for Williams, and if you really think about it, he wasn't wrong, but a lot of that had to do with the drivers crashing too much because they were trying too hard. And, you think about Nico Hulkenberg, who everybody at the beginning of the year was almost sort of like, oh, poor Hulkenberg and Magnussen, they got to drive a Haas. But towards the end of the year, there were some drivers like Fernando who'd probably be saying, yeah, I'll give Haas a go.
Right.
Right? And now Nico's off to, Audi/Steak, and it's just sort of like he's gotta be kinda going, "Oh, boy, this is not gonna be much fun," and, he's got a rookie for a teammate for next year, and so, yes, Nico's an elder statesman, and he's probably who Audi needs, But, I mean, if somebody like a Sebastian Vettel were to suddenly say, I'm bored being retired. I think I can still drive. Maybe there's a fire in my belly. Would it really shock you if he showed up at Audi? I'm not so sure I would be. So yeah, it was, I left Abu Dhabi in the last race of the season with just some mixed feelings. But having said that, and having, worked a little bit for Zach Brown 20 years ago, I was really happy to see McLaren win that Constructors' Championship for the first time in since 1998, 1999 or something like that. And maybe not quite that long, but it's been a long time since they've done it. And Zach was the guy that, led the turnaround. We've seen it. Took a long time for them from the time Zach took over to the time they won that championship. He's been there for a lot of years. And so I was glad to see it all bear fruit for him. It must feel pretty good for him.
I agree. I think it's 26 years, I think, but I don't know. You do the math. You're much better at math than I am.
Yeah, that'd be about 1998 then, if that
Yeah.
was the case.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I heard someone say 26 years. And so, because they were joking that neither Lando or Oscar were alive when McLaren
Right.
won last time. So,
Nice.
wow, that's got to make all of us feel really old. But yeah, I think you're right. The McLaren win was so inspiring because of what we've watched, their trajectory, as you noted, and especially this year, where there were so many instances where you wondered, okay, are they, like everyone making the big deal about the papaya rules and all the, all the internal challenges. And I think we've talked about this, and John has definitely brought it up in the past about a team knowing how to win, like that has won. But like, I think I brought it up earlier this year. Yes, McLaren has won in the past, but it's been 26 years. And most of the people currently on the team were not here.
Weren't there. Yeah.
Right? So like they were learning in some ways how to be a winning team again, which is where I think the birthing pains that we saw over the course of this year. And you just had to wonder, like, is it going to happen this year? And especially because it was coming down to the wire and where we weren't sure, could Ferrari have pulled it out at the last minute? And that was one of the things that I really enjoyed, was watching the Ferraris attempt, but then unfortunately not get to be closer to. But you could see that if there had been a bad call on McLaren's part, those two Ferraris were going to be there, ready and poised to take over, which was a little bit of the action that I was really looking forward to seeing. Could they? Should they? How would I feel about that? Because I like, as we all know, I cheer for everybody. So I was like, oh, but I would love to see Ferrari win, but I'd also like to see the McLarens win. So that was nice. I think what was also really hard for me was and it's bittersweet, I guess, is both Carlos and Lewis's final rides with their respective teams. And knowing that this is the end of an era for Lewis and the unknown of him transferring into Ferrari, or I can make an argument on both cases. I think I said this when the announcement came. Like, this could be one of the best decisions that Lewis has made, or it could be a really sad ending to a very good career. I don't know, because there's so many variables that we don't even have privy to all the knowledge about how he's planning and how he's handling all of this, like how the team, what preparations, culture, an individual coming into a different culture, expectations of someone who's so notable in the history of the sport, all that. And you can listen to so many people talking about whether or not they think this was good. But then the other side of it is watching Carlos, which, I've always really respected him, but I feel like this year especially, my respect for him gained leaps and bounds by the way that he handled this departure. And I listened to his Beyond the Grid interview with Tom Clarkson, which, I really enjoyed that podcast as well. So much of what I had been perceiving, to hear him articulate, the pain that he felt, how he was blindsided. And instead of taking a burn it all down kind of approach, which some would have said that was justifiable, he walked out of Ferrari giving everything to the very last lap. And I thought that's the kind of sportsmanship I want to see. And I think I called it earlier in the year. I'm pretty sure I did. I said, there's nothing to hold him back, that if Lewis leaves, if he manages this right, that Ferrari doesn't come calling again. And then recently I started hearing people say this, and I was like, wait a minute. I said this in like January when all of this hit, that if I I were advising Carlos, I'd be like, play this as the best that you can, because it says really isn't about you. It's about Lewis and them wanting Lewis, not they don't like you. But I think that was so hard for me as I watched some of the videos that they were sharing on social media of like Carlos actually crying, like the emotional toll this was taking on him. And that's where I guess because my empathetic nature, looking at what these drivers are achieving and how much they sacrifice and how much the whole group of people around them work to get them to where they are, it had to have been a bittersweet pill to have to take.
Oh my gosh,
you would work so hard, right? Like through all the team changes this kid's gone through, and every team that he's been with has come out technically better after having had him as a driver. And then the pinnacle of most drivers' aspirations of driving Ferrari, and here he's been challenging Charles, and even Charles said, I'm a better driver for having Carlos as a teammate. And you have to just wonder how hard that had to be to walk out of that paddock, right? Like that's how I felt. I just kept thinking, let this be good for Carlos. He deserves that right now for all the good he's done. Now, he's not a perfect person. So like, I don't know what like his downfalls and weaknesses are. Social media doesn't tell us that. But what they are showing to us makes me go, well, those are the positive things I would want to inspire other people as to why we look to drivers as a class of people that inspire and are role models to us.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well said. And the other part is, that he's going to raise Williams' game.
Yeah.
I mean, you just know it. I mean, he's building a reputation of a guy he's the guy you want, right? To help you bring the team forward. I mean, he helped bring the team forward with Ferrari. And I mean, we're talking Ferrari. So what's he going to do for Williams? I think it's going to be big things. And don't forget, yes, it was tire testing for Pirelli. Who knows what tire compounds and fuel loads and all this kind of stuff. But he jumps into the freaking Williams and he's second quick on the first day. And I'm like, okay, I'm impressed. I'm sorry.
Right.
I know it's postseason testing and all those things. Second place in a car you never drove before. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
to paraphrase our friend Dave.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. It's true. Well, because I think I read somewhere that he said as he was doing his last laps and drive with Ferrari, he was trying to memorize what that car felt like because he knew he was going to be jumping into the Williams, and to be able to give that type of comparison, I thought, oh, that's so smart. Like that's the way to do it, like to come in and be able to give them like, you need to do this. And only a technician like that, because everything I've been reading about him in these last months have highlighted how much he embeds himself with whatever team and the engineering and the mechanical, like he thrives on that. And I thought, yeah, you can see now where Ferrari has benefited for someone like that over these years, where it might have been a little bit overshadowed by maybe team principles or different drama, but you could see now where that has enabled the car's development, which would be key for 25 and 26, which maybe having Carlos at this point will be the game changer that Williams needs, and they can come out from the back of the grid and shock everybody.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny, while you were speaking, the thought flashed through my mind. You think about the storylines that we're talking about here about Carlos leaving Ferrari and going to Williams, and Lewis leaving Mercedes and going to Ferrari, and what's going to happen to Sergio? And we got all these young talent. Where are they going to show up, or are they going to show up? And the war between Ocon and Gasly. And then I thought to myself, the guys that Drive to Survive have got to be having a field day, because there was so much going on. On track, yes, but off the track, holy smokes, this was a pretty dynamic year. I mean, it's always dynamic. This year was over the top.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, it'll be interesting to see what they show and how they want to craft that story.
Yeah.
So we could keep talking quite a bit on some different aspects of this, like the development race. But I'm thinking, you and I had discussed this offline, that maybe we should do that for a separate conversation where you can discuss the development wars and whether or not we're seeing parity this year.
Yep. I think that's a great idea. Yep.
Okay. And then we'll keep our tradition from last year which would be a driver's report card. We'll rank, give grades. I guess report cards, grades. Yeah, grades. Yeah, because we don't want to compare. We'll just give them grades. And then we'll do a separate conversation on something you did last year, which is if you were the team principal, what would you be saying at the end of the year meetings?
Yeah, exactly.
Sound good? You like it?
Sounds great. I like it.
Okay. Well, so then for our audience, stay tuned for those discussions, and I look forward, Dick, to our next conversation.
So do I.
Okay, friends, what did you think of our conversation? Drop me a line via email, sabrina@2guysagirlandf1.com. Can you help us out? If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with other F1 fans. We know our growth is because of you, and the guys and I thank you. And with that, let me say, we'll keep talking and you can keep listening in, because we're just 2 guys, a girl, and F1. For John, Dick, and me, Sabrina, thanks for listening.